Okay, my name's Sam Knechtenhofer. I believe you talked with Cliff. So I made this guy already. I'll go through and show you how I made it. Kind of give you a step-by-step on it. But it's kind of like a hybrid between the one you sent in the pictures and my stapler, just because I needed to get some of the dimensions so that it's kind of accurate, but I tried to keep the shape of your stapler that you sent as best as I could. It's not entirely accurate. It doesn't have springs or anything in it, but it does move up and down. And if you take off this cover here, apparently my computer is having trouble running some of the extra stuff in the background. I'll just close some of these. Let's see if that helps anything. You can see I've got this assembly. It's all made out of sheet metal features. You can hide this guy. And just like the inside of a regular stapler, you've got kind of the channel there and a slot where the staples come out. I didn't include the part down here just because it was extra work, and I think this meets all the requirements you sent. It all pivots around here. So with that, I'll show you how I made it. I started with this part. It's kind of complex, but it's kind of the central part of everything. I made it out of sheet metal, so you can flatten it out like that, and you have a nice part here. And whenever you make the drawing of this part, oops, actually since it's flattened out, it updates my drawing. If I unflatten it, and then go to the drawing I made, you can see it has the nice flattened out part up here, which is nice because you don't make sheet metal out of preformed parts. So, without further ado, I started with a flange. It's called a base flange up here. You can see my sketch here is, I use millimeters, so 137 by 15.8, and that's just the bottom part. I made it 1.35 thick, which is just what the measurement I got off my my stapler. So then we have this base part here. The next step I did, these are called edge flanges, which are up here, this button up here. And to do those, you just click like this edge and this edge, and that puts a nice bend in there. I used the radius of 1 millimeter and a 90-degree bend, and I went up 21 millimeters. You click this button down here. I don't really know if you can see it, but it says to measure from this bottom face to this top face, which is how I measured it with my caliber. And then I use this button because I wanted to keep the same outside dimension, so it measures it to the outside dimension. So now we're here. I believe the next part was I wanted to close up this gap. Okay. Yeah, I just had to undo some stuff. So to close up this gap, this is just like how it is on the regular stapler. I did another set of edge flanges on this vertical side. So I clicked this edge here and this edge here, bended them inwards, used a radius of 1 millimeter and 90-degree. Blind is 6 millimeters this time, and I measured it instead from this outside edge. So from here to here is 6 millimeters. And I used the bend outwards because I wanted to leave this gap where the staples go through. So bending outwards bends it outwards, I guess. So we have this part done. It doesn't go this fast in regular building, but I'm trying to save video space. So the next step is to make this cut. Yeah, it could be different on your stapler, but this is what I did for my stapler. This is how it is on my stapler, not what I did. This, you can see all my dimensions, all based off my stapler. This is kind of what pins the top sliding down thing. It comes down here and latches into there. And this, I'm not really sure why it's on there, except it just kind of, looks cool. So we X out of that, and that was just a cut extrude all the way through. So it's straight on through. And then the next step was a boss extrude out here because what's the problem? Okay, well, it's saying something doesn't exist, but we'll keep going. Probably just I'm coming in here messing with all my settings. But so I boss extrude outwards, and all I did to do that was I drew a sketch here and a sketch here and popped it out. It's gonna keep telling me I got errors, but it's cool, you'll get the idea. So I popped it out 13.8. Again, this is just off of my stapler. Merge the result so it all stays in one solid body. And then I cut this out. I used a spline to cut out this sketch, and I just kind of eyeballed a 4.75 millimeter hole in the center. And just kind of eyeball the spline so it looks, right, which it does, in my opinion. And then the next cut extrude, I believe. Oh yes, it was this part up here. Kind of just like an aesthetic thing. Well, actually, no, this does come into play because the pin comes down and it hooks onto there as like a rest. So again, I just did a cut extrude on this face here of a sketch that looks like that. I used the center rectangle just because it kind of allows me to make references across the center better than a corner rectangle can. And the next one are these bottom ones. And this one and this one, I go into more, they're not done yet, they're just a cutout for the latch. And I'll show you here on the holder assembly. It's in reverse state. You see how this comes down? It'll latch into a flange I put down here. So we are back here. So I cut these holes out. They're just kind of holes that were in my stapler. I don't really know what they're for. And this is a part of a latch that I didn't include, but I put it in just because it kind of just adds another feature to make it look more professional. We'll go with that. So now I want to make this little lip. I'll show you what I'm doing here. I want to make a lip like this. Let's see if I can't see how it's kind of, I think it's called like a jog or something, but okay. So I started with an edge flange across this edge here and did the same thing for this edge over here. And I use a really tight radius because I don't have much room to gap because the material I used to make this jog needs to fit inside this material here. So I use 0.1 millimeters and 0.5 millimeters up I bent outwards because otherwise it does these little cutouts here, and I don't want that. So bend outwards, and then I do a edge flange along this edge and this edge, and that kind of pops it over. I use 0.1 again for my radius and 2 millimeters this time, which is just enough to kind of fit inside the length of the punch out fits in there. Let me see, maybe go and fix this stuff. Nope. And so then that allows us to, flatten everything out. See what I mean by how it had to fit in there. So that's that part. It's kind of the main overarching part of it all. So the next part I built was, I called it the staple straddle, or saddle, because the staples kind of saddle around in there. Really, all it is, it's a sheet metal part also, so I can flatten it out. Nothing too special about it. Going back to the beginning here. I did another base flange, as you can, just like the last one. It's 9.5 by 137. Just got the measurements off the part we just made, so it fits nicely in there. And then I put an edge flange straight down, so you can the dimensions are on that. I did a 5.22, which is, I think I just kind of measured it off the other one to get it about right, and measured it off staples I had. And I did material outside of the measurement because I wanted to keep this inside, this inside measurement here, I wanted to keep that the same. So I go straight down. I put a center plane in just for future assembly reference. I cut these holes out because these holes are what I'm going to put these edge flanges in, like the last one, to put these little jogs in, and those will latch into the main center part we just made, which that's kind of what holds it in. That's what holds it together on my stapler. And so yeah, like what we did on here. I did this feature. It's just an edge flange down with a 0.5 millimeter radius because we have a little bit more room to spare, so I didn't make it as unreasonably tight. 5 millimeters down because we have to go all the way down to latch in at the bottom. And again, I did a bend outside because otherwise it makes these weird cutouts here on the side that I didn't want. And then we bend it over like that, which is just another edge flange. That goes 4 millimeters straight over, and I believe I bent outside again. And so you can see if I look straight on, that kind of puts it right below the part, so it'll slide into the other part we just made. And I wanted to make it kind of pretty, so I put a fillet on the outside. I believe that's a 2 millimeter fillet. Yeah, 2 millimeters. So we have a part that can be flattened, which helps with drawing, and it's just easier to make a part like this without using sheet metal. It's just kind of unreasonably difficult. So what I made next was, I called it the top of staple straddle because I am the creative namer. But again, it's a sheet metal part. Kind of looks like that. It's kind of weird looking, but so, I guess I should say, if you don't have the sheet metal tab, I should have said this way earlier, you can right click over here and go to sheet metal, and it'll add a tab with all these sheet metal parts on it. I don't know if you ever used sheet metal before. I didn't until a few weeks ago, actually, and it has changed my life. So I started with the base flange, this button up here, which again is kind of the start of every sheet metal part. Those are the dimensions. And I edge flange upwards because that's what we do on all these parts. And I went up 0.5 millimeter bend at 10 millimeters, material on the outside. And then I boss extruded this little circle here, which will go into the hinge. Let me see if I can show you here. It'll go into this hinge over here because I hid. Yeah. Well, I have it in rollback, but this hinge will fit in there. So we are back here. But that didn't take out this little bit here. So that's what this cut extrude does, is it takes out that circle and kind of cuts away this edge here so it's a little more slimmer. I'll show you what I did for circle. The dimensions of the circle. And for the cut extrude, I just did a straight line over and cut out the circle again. Then we have a boss extrude. Let's see what I did for that one. Boss extrude. Oh, I just copied this over to this side. I tried to use a mirror, but it did some weird stuff, so I just did another boss extrude and be done with it. Okay, and then I cut this out, which is what holds that little pin I was talking about for the other one. It kind of pops in there, but I didn't include it because it's just kind of an extra detail that isn't entirely necessary for the part. I believe I was just eyeballing these measurements, and they just kind of fit together. So it's just a blind cut through in the shape. It's pretty cool how the sheet metal handles it, because it keeps them all the faces orthogonal to each other. So then I cut out this little tab, or boss extruded this little tab here, which rests on this part I was telling you about earlier. Rests on this tab here. So that's just kind of an alignment spot. We're back here. Next one, I boss extruded this guy, which I didn't include the springs just because the springs are kind of impossible to model in Solidworks, but the spring actually attaches to this guy over here and goes up and around here and then onto the, call it the staple carriage that moves the staples up to the top. So it's just kind of like this weird shape I made, trying to guess off the real stapler I had on hand. Looks like that. And then I put a little filler on the top just to clean it up. And then you can flatten it. It's pretty straightforward. Kinda. Okay, and that is all the metal parts. I came in here and made its own little separate assembly. I started with just the main part, which that's what holds everything together. And then I added the staple saddle. It fits in there like that. And I believe I used a coincident on this top face and that face for the mate, and then a distance. I kind of eyeballed the distance so that these guys line up kind of well. I guess I could have just popped it on to be coincident, but whatever. Let's look into the past. And then I lined up their planes. So this one, since I put that center plane in on this one, and this one is symmetrical across the front plane, I made both their front planes coincident. And that lines them up to be perfectly symmetric across the front plane. And then I added the top saddle here, which kind of encompasses everything into one. I lined up the holes because it's going to be, it lines up there. So, and then coincident, I did the front plane thing again as well, and parallel. I made these faces parallel, so that, and parallel. And that fully defines our assembly, so nothing moves. And that just kind of makes a nice package for us to put into the plastic parts. The plastic parts are a little bit more involved in the making of, kind of just had to guess on a lot of it. But, so I started with just a block that I just kind of eyeballed. I did 190 by 20 and just box extruded it out. I did half the distance of what I thought would be a reasonable amount, and then I'm going to mirror it across this face when I'm done. But so I'm kind of just whittling away at this block. So the first thing I did was I cut away the profile, the side profile, with this sketch here, which kind of just eyeballing it. I use splines here just because they kind of give a nice natural curve and just a flat line. So we get this shape here, and then I kind of put this. I notice how it was kind of fatter at the edge here and skinnier at the hinge. So I cut extruded from the top here, and I used just one big spline that kind of curves off there and meets the max size here, and then comes over and kind of does an S-bend, really gradual S-bend. And so we're going to have this shape now. I put a plane. What did I do to define this guy? I put him parallel into this mid plane here, and just kind of put it 13 millimeters out, which is kind of the distance of our metal assembly we made earlier. So that gives me something to base this sketch off of. So I did a sketch on this face, kind of just no dimensions, just eyeballing it, whatever looks nice. I made sure this handle was collinear with this face, so we have a nice blend in. And I just kind of moved these guys around until I found something that looked, kind of natural looking. So we got this looking, and then I kind of go through a whole series of fillets to round off these edges and round off these edges. I'm going to put a nice edge fillet around here, and then a fillet along these guys. And that gives us a nice, filleted look. And then I mirrored across, and we have this nice thinner at the hinge, thicker at the tip. No, then I put the hinge in, which I kind of had to do a little bit of guessing and moving around once I got everything made to get it in the right position. But it's just a 4.83, so it's a little bit bigger than the other ones, but it all fits together. And that is how we got this part made. Came together better than I thought it would. And I believe we have one last part, which is actually kind of my favorite part. And how it came together. I incorporated the pin into here just because it made it, one part less to have to document, and you can kind of say it's a creative use of material. That's what we'll go with. So I started with the block technique. It seems to be the best way to make those weird ergonomical shapes, in my opinion, but that's just how I do it. I did this cut extrude first, from the top. So again, we're thicker here, thinner here. I believe, well here, I'll show you the dimensions on my first block. Yeah, it won't show you the dimensions, but I put out 45 millimeters and this dimensions on the block. And for my cut extrude, I made it 20, so it's going to be 40 millimeters wide at the max and 28 at the hinge, which I imagine I was just guessing at that point, but it, yeah. Or actually no, what I did was I measured this distance. Yes, 26, so I made it 28 so that would give me a 2 millimeter clearance. So that's how I came up with those numbers. I didn't just pull them out of thin air. So we got this shape. Now we need to make it curvy, because it was blocky and now it's curvy. Again, I just